For the world. It has to be you that guides the blade. I cannot. The knight forced his eyes open. For England. And somewhere he must have gotten strength, because pushing the blade through Merlin's chest was ridiculously easy. But even as it was done and he saw Merlin's lips part on a soundless cry, he heard the riotous laughter somewhere in his head, which seemed so wrong. Merlin hadn't raised a sword against him, and in his last moments he knew that he would never take comfort in the afterlife. Merlin, for some reason he didn't understand, had just consigned him to hell. Chapter 1. Gawain let himself out of the bedroom and nodded silently to Tom as they traded places. A quick glance into the hallway, which was thankfully empty, and Gawain sagged back against the wall, his knees trembling. He couldn't do this. This wasn't supposed to happen. Galahad? Lance's son? He could feel exhaustion sapping him and glanced fondly at the empty office, his sanctuary. It had been the longest 36 hours of his life, and he'd never felt so inadequate, so completely unprepared for what he was supposed to do, even if he knew what he was supposed to do. He straightened up at the sound of running steps and forced a smile at Kay as he came down and headed with him to the kitchen. "How's Galahad?" "Tom's in there with him. He's asleep, but I don't want him alone if he wakes." Kay's smile was sympathetic. Galahad's healing would take time none of them thought they had. They'd had a call an hour ago from a detective Aarons who would be coming to interview Roxy. The regular cops had come yesterday, and Gawain didn't know how Roxy hadn't been arrested. Lucan had convinced them they were mistaken, but that wouldn't work with everyone. They couldn't deny it was her getting out of the car because the internet lasted forever, but it had bought some time while they came up with a better idea. And 50 guests had, at the very least, seen them fighting. Lucan and Ali had tracked some of them down, and Lucan had convinced them their memories were false, so the cops so far had many and differing descriptions of the so-called terrorists. But it was a mess, and Gawain didn't think this detective would be as easy to convince. Tom was going to keep an eye on Galahad, as he hadn't been left alone once in the last 24 hours, and Gawain promised himself he wouldn't be. Not, at least, until they'd had the chance to talk. Not, at least, until he had the first clue what to say when they did have a conversation. Yesterday had been limited to asking after his physical discomfort, but Gawain didn't know what today might bring. And there were only so many times he could check if he was warm enough. And he ached to give him so much more. In the space of a day and 2 nights since he had stood completely bewildered as Lance had made the cut on his arm to bind them together, he still didn't know what to feel, how to feel. The connection was there, but he didn't know what to do with it. Roxy was on the phone as he walked in, and the tension around the room increased as she told the person she was talking to she loved them and clicked her phone off. She looked at Ali and shook her head. Ali rushed over to her and drew her into her arms. "What's happening?" Roxy looked up. "My sister just got a call from the cops, and she's having a visit from them later. She was going to say I'd been there, but I wouldn't let her lie. The photo was pretty unmistakable anyway." "Do we have any ideas?" Gawain walked to the full coffee pot and helped himself just to have something to do, and to stop himself from rushing back into the bedroom. Not being able to physically see Galahad made his skin crawl in a way he hated, and in a way he was at a loss with. Lance glanced over at him. "Lucan tracked down at least 10 guests yesterday and planted totally different images in their minds, which will help. But there were at least 50 guests that we don't even know the names of." Gawain nodded. He'd already seen Lance briefly that morning when he'd called in to see how Galahad was. Galahad had been asleep. The knock at the door silenced everyone, and Kay rose. "Let me." In another minute, Kay walked back in with 2 detectives. If either of them was surprised to see that many people, they didn't show it. Gawain liked Detective Aarons right away. Tight,